Okay, and I will speak English, of course. Uh, if you have any questions, ask immediately in terms of understanding. Just interrupt me and I'll try to clarify this. And I will try as well to speak slowly, which makes it a little bit longer, but we have time. Having said we have time, you know the topic, the title, Bubble Economies, Bullshit Jobs, Shredding Paintings. Now you can all say once bullshit. It's not, of course, an academic term. It's not a term we are used to. It's going back to a book which had been recently published in 2018. A theory of bullshit jobs. I'll come back later to this, what it means. Looking at the topic was actually a little bit difficult in terms of, I came up with this title, and then I had been asked, it should be something on public spaces, on publicity, on publicness. So first I thought, okay, can you combine it? And I think in general, it is a difficult thing, a huge challenge, but as well, this is the exciting part of academic work, bringing things together that are not obviously going together. This is already the case with bubble economies, bullshit jobs, shredding paintings, and then publicness came on top of it. Was a challenge for me thinking about it. The idea of this shredding paintings had been actually something that happened recently, that during an auction, one of these paintings, part of this painting, had been auctioned, had been sold for a huge amount of money. And just the second when the hammer went down, the painting went down as well and had been shredded, had been destroyed. I said it's in English, which means, of course, I'll start with the French sentence. Non, la peinture n'est pas faite pour décorer les appartements, c'est un instrument de guerre, offensif et défensif contre l'ennemi. That's Picasso. Paintings are not made for decoration, but they are made, it's an instrument of fighting, of open fight, of defending something, or of trying to get something new on the way. Art must, that's another Mayakovsky, art must not be concentrated in dead shrines called museums. It must be spread everywhere, on the streets, in the trams, factories, workshops, and in workers' homes. So there you see already a point of, yes, we are talking about something that is public. Now, what Bansky, one of these artists or entertainers or activists, actually is, it's a little bit a mysterium. Kind of everybody knows about him, not everybody, but he's well known. It seems to be that he is contactable as well, that you can say, okay, there is an address and you can contact him. And at the same time, kind of nobody really knows where he is, what he is. And I say what he is because it is, in the meantime, at least kind of movement. And apparently nobody knew what happened, how it was possible that during this auction, out of a sudden, out of the blue, more or less this painting went down. He claimed it was my idea. I installed this mechanism, and somebody said, I saw some strange person there with a remote control, actually, most likely, this is what happened. That somebody, most likely Bansky himself, some people say, activated this mechanism to destroy the painting. Now, as I said, I want to bring different things together, not talking about Bansky or this painting or this action or whatsoever would be interesting in its own. I want to take up something, trying to get this together, trying to look as well at the current economic challenges we face, by going back, referring to something in a book by Postman, writing about TV and saying what we are facing is not so much the danger of Orwell, Animal Farm, but it is about Huxley, The Brave New World, where he says the one is, that would be in many cases what people say about digital industries and computers and internet. There is somebody from outside accessing the information and observing us, and there is this surveillance. Huxley would be the other way, kind of we are made happy by this. It's an amazing thing. We all complain about surveillance, and then we log into our account, be it as researchers, there are certain networks, be it Facebook, and most of us have actually different of these social networks, called social networks, which is a new space. And in a way, we complain about it, and at the same time, we use them. And we are happy with it. And of course, they have something that is relevant for the way we live, for our ways of socialization. What is the economic side of this entire topic? Economics has a socio-political dimension. We are not talking about, I had not been talking only teaching not only in different countries, but as well on different subjects. If we talk about economics, what you usually find is figures, equations, and in a way, very simple things dealing with demand and supply on the market. But what it actually is, and this is one of the few quotes I really do provide, is according to the materialist conception, the determining factor in history is, in the last resort, the production and reproduction of the immediate life. So this is what we do every day. It's not only the way of shopping, but there is so much involved in terms of socializing, in terms of what do we buy, what do we consume, where do we do it. This is the real part of the economy, if you want. And this is the way of how we make history. This is the way how we create, in a way, or avoid creating public spaces. Do we buy via internet? Do we buy in the shop, in the small shop, or in the shopping center? Or actually, do we go there where one can buy and do something completely different? Now there is a methodological problem. In this way, that we always start simplified from what we know. Otherwise we couldn't. Take the language. I cannot simply speak out of sudden a foreign language. You can listen to me because you know something. And we always think about something that we know, and it is extremely difficult to move forward. Learning language is, in most of the cases, taking place by referring to your native language and then saying, this is a car, dies ist ein Auto, c'est une voiture, you translate. What happens? What do you see there? Is it a rabbit or is it a duck? And if you look at it, at some stage, you come to this point, you will only see a duck or a rabbit. You won't see the other part anymore. It's just the one side. You are fixed to this one side. And it had been said by somebody well known, actually scientists in terms of natural science. He said, whatever we do or do today in philosophy, in our thinking, is a footnote to Plato. Basically, since Plato, we didn't make any real progress. This is the mindset, at least, from where we come today in our thinking. We come from this mindset, it's a duck, it's a rabbit. And it's extremely difficult to go the other way around. There are certain paradigm shifts. Thomas Kuhn was working on this, where he says in the real development, in the development of reality, you find changes, fundamental changes. So in academic work, in the academic world, you have simply this, we move on from what we know. We don't really make new inventions, new detections whatsoever. We just increase the knowledge in this way. There's nothing really new. We get more details, we get more current figures or something like this. But, and this is important to consider, reality and our thinking about reality is very much in the same channel. And then something new comes, be it a technical innovation, be it a genius, saying, no, we have to question this. There's something that doesn't fit anymore. There is something that doesn't allow us anymore to think in terms of hammer and nail. What we have, the instruments we have, is there are, in many cases, we can think about it in terms of tools we have. Methodology and methods are different things, but methodology develops to some kind of tool as well, to kind of method, and we always use the hammer. Until we mention, actually we limit ourselves. The limit is we can only drive nails into the wall or into a piece of timber or whatsoever. With a screw, we have difficulties. We can try it. At some stage, we say, no, we need a new tool. We need a new methodology. And at some stage, this is a very fundamental thing that actually we want not only to drive something, a screw or a nail, into the wall, but we have a new paradigm. We have completely something that is completely new. And I hesitate here. There's nothing coming to my mind now that I say, yes, of course, this is an example. Because it would be something new. I would not know, I wouldn't have an idea of what could replace this old-fashioned mechanism. You can say glue was actually something that is a more or less fundamentally new thing. Then we have, of course, these technological developments that shape exactly our being, our existence. Technology, computers, digital industries, the way we work. We did not always work the way in which we did, in which we do today. There had been different measurements as well. One of the most fascinating things, because it's such a small item, is the clock. The clock changed fundamentally our entire life. It was not just a way to determine time, but it was getting independent of time, getting a new, hugely progressive way of measuring time. It was not anymore given by nature, given by climate, given by something like this. It was getting independent. It was something that we could control. And there is this fascinating thing, and we had been completely controlled by this. The clock, moreover, is a piece of power machinery whose product is seconds and minutes. By its essential nature, it dissociated time from human events and had created the belief in an independent world of mathematically measurable sequences. Completely different to what we had been used to. And something we are used to today in such an extent that we are not thinking about it anymore. Time is something expressed in mathematical units, independent of something in reality. It's an abstraction. The special world of science, this was it. And there is a relatively little foundation for this belief in common human experience. Common human experience said, it's dark now, don't go out, or at least be careful if you go out. Climate changing seasons would suggest something in real world. Now we have had this artificial instrument. This is something that happens today again on another level with these digital industries. These are completely out of place, if you want. And we all have our experience. You see something happening without that you actually know what is happening. You see something happening, you go to, at some stage it would have been something you wouldn't say because it's kind of advertisement. Today it is a common term. We Googled something. At some stage you could Alta Vista something, or there have been many different search engines. They are still there, many of them, and many are very different and very specific, and you should go there. And I don't know if it's here in the library, they make sometimes courses how to use search engines, and don't go always to Google. But what happens is that Google has a special way of answering questions. And this is the point where you have a link to the clock, and where you have a link to something that happens already very early in industry. Early 1900s, called Taylor. This is what Google, but as well this entire idea is about. You create a world, and you is we create a world by asking the right questions, by asking those questions Google can answer. We are not open in the questions. In academic world, this is the most difficult thing in general, to ask questions and to be open about questions and to say, what is it? I don't know what it is. Up to this point where I say, actually, I think it is an animal. But I'm not sure. What makes me uncertain about it? Because it is something that is not clear. At some stage you can come to the point and say, yes, it is an animal. And now I have to go on and figure out which kind of animal, what kind of animal, which animal. One of the methodological points here is that it is not an animal. Whatever it is not an animal. It is not a duck, it is not a rabbit. But it is a depiction of. An animal would, at this stage, have been walking away. This thing cannot walk away. This is a drawing, it's a depiction of something, and this is what exactly this entire process means, basically. You are not working independently on a subject, but it is defined by certain criteria of efficiency. Taylorism, and then what Eric Schmidt said, CEO of Google, we are working according to these laws of Taylorism that had been introduced as a means of industrial policy, getting people work according to the time, minimize the time they invest to produce something. We try to be very data-driven and quantify everything. That's another Google executive adding, Marissa Mayer. We live in a world of numbers. We don't live in reality. We don't live even in drawings. We live in numbers. And you have to imagine this. Actually, when I bought my first computer, I had been asked, do you know anything about computers? And that was the time when it had been called data processing. I said, well, not really. I worked on an old data processing machine, which had been about the size of this room. You could do amazing things with it. You can do this with a telephone today. But the basic principle was you worked and still work very much with two numbers, 0 and 1. Do you see a 0 there? You probably see on the screen somewhere. But basically 0 and 1 doesn't play a role. And to write something in zeros and 1 is extremely difficult. This is why you couldn't do anything with these machines, at least not to the extent that we can today. Because today you have, for a long sequence of zeros and 1, you have only HTML. And then you have a certain sign, and that's it. This is an amazing thing of mindset. This is the change that is getting clear. And this is an amazing thing of mindset as well, that allows, and then we come back to Huxley or Orwell, that allows us to do something like this. If we look at many of these modern industries or service providers or money makers or speculation bodies or whatever it is, we don't really know what they are. We know Google is Google and we can search something. We know as well there are Google Maps and other things. We know that they make money with advertisement. And we know that they are so rich that we cannot know what to do with this money. This is unimaginable. We come a little bit back to this. But what we really know is localized Google Maps for retailers. So you go into a shop. In China, we are very advanced in this. Don't believe anything of Google not being active in China. The search engine is blocked, yes, but there are other things where Google is active. So you go to a shop, and there are certain heat patterns taken by a map. Be it this one of where you go, or be it something else. Right, this is no. What you touch means it gives the retailer the information how to place things. It's not new. Every retailer, every shop holder would have done this for ages. Now they just have a new tool. So in this way, there is no major paradigm shift. There is only a change of the tool, actually, and it is perfected. But at the same time, it is perfected in this way of now there is a figure put onto it. Now it's not the experience, but there is a figure put onto it, and everything is expressed in this mathematized way. Including, we only ask those questions, if you really want an answer, that can be expected to be answered by one of these machines. I came recently about it myself, and then you see the limit of the entire system. I was looking for budget. I was looking simply for a definition, concise definition, what is the budget? Budget car hire, so and so. I said, no, I don't want to hire a car. Next one, budget car hire in another place. And then you go through it, and at some stage, you come to the meaning of the term budget in terms of the household. Which means, basically, you have to know what you are looking for. And if you don't know it, you may get useful information which is not the correct one. It's kind of answering the question, but only formally, only on this level. And the problem with it, the challenge in the academic world, but as well in everyday's life, is the question of decoding. Things are coded, there is a number put onto it, and we have to decode it, meaning we have to get the content, get the duck. If you go back to this, we have to get the duck or the rabbit out of the drawing. A hugely different thing where we should not overestimate the change that is taking place. We have this as a problem of language. And we have this as a problem of academic work, but as well of everyday thinking. Are we looking simply for a solution of the problem we have now? Or are we looking for something that is critical about reality and tries to change reality? Robert Cox was actually engaging on this theoretically and saying that there are two different ways of thinking. The one is problem solution, the other is a critical way. And this is where, with this entire process of mathematization, of formalization, of fragmentation, we are more and more drawn into this issue of problem solution. It's very easy to find a solution to a problem for today. It doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. If we have this attitude, there is no problem. If we have another attitude and say we need a perspective, we have to build up a perspective, then we come into this difficulty of what is the question? In economics, we always have this issue of, do we want economic growth? Do we want employment? And do we want to have it for today, or do we want to have it for a long-term period? What is the role of the small shop, the large shopping center, and the world market? You always have to try to think this together. And then you come to this point where, back to economics really, but now talking about political economy as a historical science, you always come to the point where you have to think it is a matter of socialization. Nobody does anything for him or herself. If you work in your little office and you do something, you are not working on yourself, on your own. You are part of the machines, the instruments you use, the language in which you think, and at the same time, or a little bit later, something where you want to deliver to, a market. Even if you are at home, even if you are working on your own, there is always as well this issue of communication. Some people say even thinking needs communication because we are thinking in language. The typical question for us, meaning for people who are traveling around and working in a different country, after a while people ask you, actually, in which language do you dream? Because usually you dream in a language, even if you forgot it next morning. The amazing thing is if you start to dream in a language, you don't know anything about this language. And you see yourself in, oh gosh, this was an interesting dream last night. I was talking, had been speaking Turkish, I had been speaking Czech. I don't know a word Czech, but I had been dreaming, I had not. But after a while, it can happen that you dream actually in a language that you don't know. Anyway, you dream in language, you communicate always when thinking, and you do it, and in this way, this may be true even that you dream in a language that you don't know. You are dreaming in, or you are working, you are living in an environment. You are producing yourself, every day's life, it's happening in an environment. What is the environment like? This is an important question in terms of that the environment is made by these tools. On the one hand, we have this metaphor, we have this metaphor, we see the duck or rabbit, and at the same time they are, of course, made There's this beautiful English term, probably it's a Czech term as well, Zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. And we are thinking of it. Somebody can now see there is a rabbit or a duck. If you are coming from a completely different cultural background, you cannot even see this. There is something, how do I depict this and that animal? And this is linking them to mathematization, putting a figure on it, design as a science rather than art. I'm coming from Ireland as well. When I moved to Ireland, there was this, the tourist board had been advertisement island, the island nation with 40 shades of green. And the green had been the nature. That was, it's a beautiful country actually, if you go there, you can only recommend it. 40 shades of green. I never counted if it's true. Today it's counted the shades of blue. This is what Google does. And what is behind this is what the map did for space, translates a natural phenomenon into artificial and intellectual conception of this phenomenon. Another technology, the mechanical clock, did for time. And now we have this new way of putting everything into these numbers. And this number is not just a number, but it is relating to you. This is something that Google does as well. They check in which way, or not necessarily with your computer because you have the camera there or whatsoever, they check how do you react to the different shades of blue. How do you react in terms of your search behavior depending on the distance between the different blocks on the site? It's amazing. It's amazing to see how you can influence people's behavior according to the way of designing websites, of designing I anticipate something this now, in designing a specific public space. Because my thesis would be the internet is in a way a public space. What happens with it is we are externalizing something. We are externalizing time in terms of making it calculable. It's not the weather, it's not the climate, it's not whatsoever. It is the clock determining seconds and minutes and hours. Now we are doing the same with our thinking. We are externalizing our feelings, our search behavior, our approach to the environment or to our thinking. We are externalizing this to the machine. And part of it is as well, we are creating something supposedly very good in inventing new terms, making something interchangeable. This is not new. My term is to set up, to develop a system of exchangeabilization. Everything that does not fit into this framework, it is exchangeable, is not of interest. So, media, we put something, our reproduction of our life is depending as well on the media we use. These are, in one way or another, language, digital industries, drawings, whatsoever, they are public ways of communication. And talking about the meaning of it, it is actually time that we are dealing with. The externalization, internalization of time. This is what you do if you go to a job. As we say, 9-to-5 jobs. There is a certain part of your day dedicated, this is time dedicated to a specific issue, namely employed work. From 9 to 5, even if it's from 8 to 4 or whatsoever, even if it's during the night, which you can do today because you are independent of light. Ultimately, all economy is a matter of economy of time. Society must also allocate its time appropriately to achieve a production corresponding to its total needs. So we have the different segments of our life, and this is an important term here, the segmentation as well of life. Here you work, and there you live. Reconciliation of work and life. Work-life balance. I love these terms because they are so stupid. At 9 o'clock I stop to live, I'm dead, and work, there's some truth in it. And at 5 I awake, I'm revived, I can go back to life. It's an amazing thing how fragmented this is in our thinking. We don't discuss really today this problematic behind it, work-life balance. We take it for granted that there are certain fragments. And that there are certain fragments as well, segments, fragments, ghettos. Here it is the shopping zone, here it is the leisure zone, here it is whatsoever the working zone. In terms of time, in terms of space. I like making things a little bit complicated. Actually, I think it is making things easier. If you go back ancient times, read Karl Marx, read Hannah Arendt, read many people working on this, there was this segmentation, labor, this is the terminology of Hannah Arendt, labor, work and action. Labor, in her understanding, going back to ancient philosophy, labor is actually what you, the immediate reproduction, what you need to live. The food on the table. No, the food. The table is work. It is producing something lasting. The food is gone after the meal. The table is still there. And action, the table being product of work, action is sitting around the table and enjoying the meal. Free way of thinking, free ways of socializing, and this is why the reference to ancient times is important. At that stage, it was the slave doing the labor, some slaves being privileged and doing the work, and the patrons, slave holders, slave owners or whatsoever, doing the action. Imagine this time issue of I'm living in a leisure time. But this leisure time, in that understanding, is time where I can freely socialize. If you go once to Athens, I can only recommend you go to this area where you can then think and dream about, yes, you can imagine Plato here, Socrates here, just walking around, thinking freely, having their academia around them and thinking about the work. It was hard work, but not in the understanding of producing anything, not in the understanding of I'm under this pressure of doing something. Now we have, of course, different contradictions, and the one contradiction of this way of thinking had been written about, I think there was a film made out of it as well, in a book on measuring the world. I think that's the title. I think it's a beautiful book, dealing with two people in history, not ancient history, but later. And this was a major shifting in history and thinking. That was Gauss and Humboldt. Gauss had been sitting in his office, or in his room, doing all these things I don't understand, high mathematics, seemingly kind of useless, at least in daily life. People didn't really engage in this kind of mathematical thinking. But he was enjoying this, and he was saying, this is actually explaining the world. This is all what we need. We can figure out, we can measure the world, and whatever we cannot measure is not really relevant. And Humboldt, being the explorer, he went out into the world and said, these calculations, they don't mean anything. I have to look, I have to experience distances, I have to experience different temperature, I have to explore this. I have to explore the world by going out and seeing reality. It had been then, those times, that we would have, or that we should say, wow. You see something? 0 and 1. 0 and 1. This is the first, in a way, the first computer by Leibniz. Those years, around those years. We have had then the idea of you can basically reduce this reality on these two figures and the different combination it makes. It's an amazing thing. And it is amazing because it is just the difference of getting a huge instrument to know more about the world just by these two figures and their combination. And at the same time, we are cutting off the other experience of Humboldt, or we have to put it somewhere. I read on the way here a book on the philosophy of walk. Walking is not a sport, walking is not an exercise, walking is a philosophy. The way of getting engaged with nature, the experience of not being guided by anything, only by the two steps or the two legs with which we step forward. It's an amazing thing, and the difficulty is possibly the impossibility, and we have to live with this, possibly the impossibility of really combining it. Then we have another contradiction. It's more economic, the extension and contraction of time and space. The global village. We are living in a global village with all the difficulties. Is it really appropriate to speak of a village? Can we say it is a global public space connected by the internet, connected by 0 and 1? On the one hand, we are getting more and more independent, transcending nature, and at the same time, we lose this immediate contact, this immediate experience. So loss and gain at the same time. Again, we have this loss of living while we are working, or we are very privileged that we can do it, but in general we have this separation. And of course, it means as well, bringing us another step further to public spaces, that we have a tension between cohesion and inclusion. We include more and more. We don't have this immediate separation, segregation. This is where these people live and go shopping, and this is another area for the rich, for the poor, for the foreigners, migrants, whatsoever. We have this going together, and at the same time, we have a loss of identity, because we have to find at least a way of expressing who we are in a space that is now open for everybody. We still do it. Clothes, the way we dress, not only the clothes as such, hairstyles, whatsoever. It's interesting, I'm living actually in a student's dorm at the moment. There are certain things you have to do as sociologist. Living in another country. Living, not going there for holidays. Living in another country. Living in a different area. If you have an urban background, go to a rural background. Really living there. If you are more or less old, live in a student dorm. There are some people just kind of looking, kind of exotic figure, or actually asking me, I thought it's only for students here. No, that's not fine. I'm actually studying myself still. And some are looking at you, I have to say that I sometimes wonder if they want to provoke that I bring them to court because discrimination, age discrimination. It's kind of interesting experience, but you have to, all these things, you have to live it. You don't go there, even if you say I go there and live a year in another area, in another country, it doesn't count. You know after a year you will go back. Zinner wrote a beautiful piece on the stranger. And this is the one who is not from there and he will not leave. You are going to this place and you don't say, I leave after you. You completely accommodate, but you will be always the one who is a stranger, who comes from a different place, who speaks the language perfectly. But at some stage you think, there's something strange. The typical example in English is the R, or actually in many languages, the R, the R, the R, the R. And somebody asked me actually when I lived in Italy and was going to visit, I don't know, Ireland, I think, and she said, actually you are able to speak, you pronounce the Italian R? I said, yeah, fine. But I'm sure a native speaker will still find out, yes, it's not the R. You find these small things which are hugely important. And going to sociology, you probably heard or will hear about Pierre Bourdieu. These small differences making a huge difference in terms of your placement in the assessment by others. Which is the ultimate tension, contradiction of power. And I propose always we have two dimensions of power. The one thing is the control, what we usually understand as control, and the other is being able to do something, being able to control a car. It's not necessarily my car. This is the related power property relationship. This is one thing. The other is I am able to drive it, even if you own it. Maybe you cannot drive it for whatever reason. You never learned it. But I can drive it technically. And this is then the question as well of talking about the internet, of who is actually in control of it. The ownership is the one thing. You have some experts dealing with it, and there you find an interesting thing in terms of economics as well, that what is Google today had not always been Google. Google Maps, there had been some intelligent, playful person playing around and establishing maps. And then Google said, that sounds interesting, let's have a look, and then they bought it. This is what happens. This happened, I don't know all these programs, Picasso or whatsoever. Poor Picasso having a software application named after him. The problem is, again, this fragmentation that you find now going together with commodification. This had been an academic game, if you want, an academic way of trying to understand, making sense out of this reality. Now, the additional point is making money out of it, commodification. And then you find actually a new tension or contradiction or challenge to make money out of it. You have to go further in the fragmentation on the one hand, and you have to put more meaning to the one item. You are not buying runners, but you are buying, I don't know what this is, you are buying an identity with it. The Apple generation, the iPhone generation. And this is what they managed. They did not sell a phone or a smartphone, they sold an identity. You find in advertisements, if you go around at several airports, the EasyJet generation. You can only fly with them. But you are part of a generation. In a way, fragmentation, you can only sell flights, you don't want to do more, or you have a separate segment of your enterprise where you do other things, but at the same time you set up an identity. This is, for instance, something that Facebook managed to sell an identity that promised to be more and to be more real than reality. You have friends. And they are real. They communicate with you. All the time, 24 hours a day. Always there. There's always someone. And of course it's tempting. And it is tempting because our life itself is fragmented as well, in different ways. The final working definition of bullshit job is a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as part of the conditions of employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case. We are doing something, we know there is no point in doing it, and at the same time, we say, of course, it makes sense. Depending on where you are working, where you are active, and I don't buy into this theory of bullshit jobs, and if I would do anything like this, I would say it is about bullshit activities. We are doing so many different things that don't make any sense. But at the same time, we have to do it. Why? We have to do it because we are in different ways bound to this socio-economic system and historical political system that we have to follow it and we have to accept the terms and conditions, even if they don't make any sense. They make some sense somewhere. Just for entertainment, some quotes. I had a bunch of bullshit call center jobs. These call centers where you answer the phone of stupid people who don't know what they're asking because the computer is breaking down or whatsoever. They don't know what to ask really. But you have this job selling things that people didn't really want or need, taking insurance claims, conducting pointless market research. You can add something like this. You are selling people the illusion of getting help with their computer, even if they do something. It still doesn't work, but you get on for another half day or 1 hour or a week. It doesn't solve the problem. It's not just a lack of positive contribution, but you are making an active negative contribution to people's day. I call people up to help them useless shit, it's quoting, you are allowed to quote, then it's fine. Useless shit they didn't need, specifically access to their credit score that they could obtain for free elsewhere, but that we are offering with some mindless add-ons for £6.99 a month. It's great, isn't it? And you have this feeling of, yeah, I do something. Actually, I generate money. I generate profit. I contribute to, and there you find a pendant, complement to identity. Not only as customer, but as producer, I'm as well part of this generation, of the EasyJet generation. The identification with your employer is in many cases amazingly, hugely strong. In this way, I would not say with Graeber, these bullshit jobs are just useless. They are, in a way, the garbage needed to keep this thing together. Usually in building, we talk about mortar and the bricks and mortar. And here you have something going back to an old way of building, which is the half timber house. I don't know if you can use this, know this term. It's the timber and the mortar in it. I once saw one being rebuilt, and there is much garbage in it, or there had been much garbage used just to keep things together. And this is what these jobs do. And it is as well simply economically a buffer. You have always some people who can, if needed, work do additional work. Economics, in the stricter sense, there is this amazing thing of network economics. You invest something. This is what Elon Musk did, CEO of Tesla. He did as well as PayPal thing. And what they did before, at the beginning, they paid everybody who used PayPal $20 up to a certain time, and then they said, now we are such a strong network, we pay only $10. And then they reduced it further to $5. And now they don't pay anything anymore. You just use it because there is an advantage of being part of this network. There is an advantage of being part as well of this network of networks and being part of a work environment, even if your job actually is not a valid job. You are not really producing anything. Then there is the way of complementarity in economics. We always have these examples. If you produce CD players, the amount of CDs will increase. If you sell CD players, the amount of CDs will increase as well, that you sell. Because you want to make use out of it. The other way around, and it doesn't matter, if you sell CDs, people will buy CD players. So you have this, again, fragmentation of bringing things together, establishing by more and more fragmented products, you find this complementarity. You have to join this club, even if you know it is what is called bullshit. Just that you see that we are really in economics not working with anything else than simple figures. This is the complementarity. One, you change one, the other will change as well, and this means that these network industries try actually to create spaces where you are increasingly depending on them, and they try to provide everything free, everything for free, up to a certain point that you are caught and you cannot escape anymore. And this is happening as well with the enterprise. What firms in economic sense did, they include everything into the enterprise, into the firm. Work is happening in the firm, and there you have the increasing division of labor. And then you end up with these jobs where you go in the morning and you say, this will be another useless day, and you end up in the evening and you can say, yes, it had been a useless day. It was just one of these jobs that did not produce anything, that was completely useless. No point in doing it. And we have this super exploitation. We accept this because we want to be part of this family, or we want to be able, we gain the money, we earn the money with it, that enables us to be part of another family. We have to buy a computer in order to be part of the academic system. You will find this possibly at some stage in your own career. When I studied economics, I first studied sociology with this computer, and then I studied later economics, and I saw my fellow sitting there with a programmable pocket calculator. This was not doing the same thing as the large computer, but pretty much of it. So I was kind of feeling strange. This is what was in this room. So the point is, we could give the orders to the computer. Somebody was dealing with it. Now we had to do it ourselves with our little things. We had to buy these things. We had to join the club. And this means we sell our, in inverted commas, we sell our entire personality going into it. This means as well that we find an amazing thing in industrial sociology now and industrial reality, what is called gamification. This is not my invention, this term, gamification. Being so used to this way of thinking, this is the point where it comes back to what I said earlier. Being so engaged and enjoying so much, one click, something happens. 2 clicks, and you compete with yourself, you compete with the machine. Gamification at work. And they built in this success story into the work of producing something. You click something, something happens, and you get the benefits. You get the illusion of the benefit. And the illusion is today not about ducks and rabbits, but the illusion is of scores, of being valued by the machine, being competing with others. It's an amazing thing. Economically, it can only happen, I alluded to this, because they make money, I said, from nothing, and there is an over-accumulation. Basically, if anybody talks about poverty today, or there is not enough money to invest into something, there is too much money. The problem is to invest it profitably. The money is not the question. The question is where to invest. Investment is always dealing or always oriented to short-term return. The rate of return is relevant there. The problem in a way is, if you have too much money, what do you do? And this is what you find interestingly with many of these enterprises. Go to which name ever. Bill Gates is probably the most famous at the moment. Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg in Washington, he sold himself as a charity in front of this hearing. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They do good. They do good work for health issue, but there is no right, there is no real public control of this. They do whatever they want to do. They determine what actually happens in the public. Because they as well develop these products on the one hand, and at the same time they engage us in a way of accepting this. We don't want to do this. We always say, no, it is good not to do this, not to consume, not to follow the trend because it's Apple, it's Facebook, it's whatever. Do our own thing. And at the same time, we always still do it. We join because this is the public we have. We are, coming back to another point from earlier, we are caught in what I would say 4 dimensions of problematic methodologies. Individualism. Although we are socializing, we are thinking about individuals. I am doing this and that, he, she is doing that and that, and society is made up of individual action. I am not thinking about you. I am thinking about my benefit. This is what had been defined basically in early philosophy and economics. Nationalism, we are always thinking about nation states, still, even if we are living in a globalized world. Solutionism, fragmentism. We want a solution now for this one problem, whatever happens afterwards. Presentism, as I said, we want it now, short-term orientation. And then I come basically, or I come to an end by coming back to Bansky. Now you can have different opinions on Bansky. He is a self-made outsider. On the one hand, he doesn't want to be part of the arts market or whatsoever. He used and uses many of these things. The original is a mural, which had been used in many places in London, all washed away or taken away. He linked many of his action, many of these murals, to certain topics, anti-war, whatsoever. And then he was, as well, having these paintings. They had been sold. And he said, there's a frame around it. Okay, if it's sold, I simplify a little bit, but if it's auctioned, if it's a matter of speculation, this is something I don't want to allow. And then I press the button and it destroys. The problem with it is you want to be part of this public discourse. You want to contribute not only to decorate spaces, but to have action linked to what you can do, and this is graffiti painting. You want to express something publicly. And of course there is a huge audience to it. Not only the passers-by, there as well, but there is always hope. If you see it there, it's written there, it's not on the painting. There is always hope. This was his message. Don't give up. Not have this illusion of hope. Don't give up. Find yourself. Try to realize your dreams. This cannot be a matter of speculation. Then it's getting destroyed. I don't know how much they achieved with the auction. I think it was about around 1 million euro, 800 something pounds. Then it was destroyed. Then there was a dispute. The buyer saying, no, sorry, I bought a painting, not something that was destroyed. They agreed. The person kept this painting. I think it is about 200,000, 300,000 euro more of value. In a way, you cannot escape halfway. You give in or you don't give in. Or you try, and this is what I see at least as an opportunity, if I go to new shopping centers, possibly we will see it here as well with industrial places being used today. The old industries don't exist anymore. They won't be established anymore. But the question is, can we keep out, or can we use them and not allowing others to use them? Can we use this art, what he does with his murals, can we use it as a street action in public spaces, making action out of it. And this is really then bringing me to the end. Non, la peinture n'est pas faite pour décorer les appartements. C'est un instrument de guerre offensive et défensive contre l'ennemi. We have to fight this enemy of taking over by numbers. We have to have this courage as well to use, of course, all these digital gadgets, but that we determine what the use is instead of allowing others to do. We cannot say, no, there is no shopping. We just stop consumption. But the question is, can we use it really as a matter of what I said, producing and reproducing our life, meaning defining still our life, what we want to do with life. And in this way, I would always say, in a nutshell, public space is about discourse. It is not about a one-sided discourse, but it is about engaging with each other. You can do it in literally spaces, you can do it on the internet, you can do it in writing, or you can do it in seminars, wherever. And this is something we have to fight for as well, getting these spaces, for instance, in universities, to say not only courses in terms of ECTs or whatsoever, but having space where we can go. So, long enough, sorry for taking so long, but being carried away by us. Thank you.